Hi, it's John Glynn. In this particular tutorial I'm just going to do a quick overview of layers. Layers are found on the right hand side of your working area in Photoshop, in all versions of Photoshop. But to pick up layers, if they're not open, you can find them under Window. This will be in all versions of Photoshop. There's the word layers. If I click on it in this way, it will turn off actually, but if I go back to it and go to Window and click Layers, you'll see it reappearing on the right hand side. Layers are where you'll find a background thumbnail of your own little image that's open. In Photoshop Elements you'll also find layers as an option down at the bottom of your working area. It will have layers, and if I click that with the left mouse key it will close and open. I'm just using a PC with a mouse, nothing special, so everything I'm doing here anybody can do with any computer basically. I'm not trying to be clever with what I'm doing. Layers work in that you can have your background layer and you can also have other effects over the top of it. So I'm going to create a couple of layers just because you can see then how they will work. So I'm doing hue and saturation. All of these things I do in more detail in my videos anyway, so I'm not going to go into any detail on these. And you can do some effects. So each of these things in the adjustment hue, the fill and adjustment layer will create their own layer. These layers can move, so I can drag them up and down as I see fit, so they're not fixed in one place. Hue can be moved up above the inverted picture. It may not change the picture at all, but in some cases it will do. So you have to be aware of where your layers are in some aspects of the actual software. So when you're changing anything with your layers, you just have to be aware where they are in relationship to one another. So I can drag levels all the way down, and you can see that definitely makes a difference with how the picture will look. Okay, so just depending on where that happens to be within the layer grouping will have an impact on your picture. Okay, but not all of them do. But you can move the layers up and down. All you do is click on a layer with the left mouse key, drag up and let go, and you'll find that when you move them, the line between each layer will get slightly wider, and that means then you can drop it in to that particular point. Okay, so it's a matter of just looking at the line in between the layers, the one at the top, the ones in the middle, for moving them around. On the left hand side of each layer there's an eye, and that eye you can turn on and off. If you turn it off, it means that that effect you've got isn't working, but you may want to see it with it working. Okay, so if it's off and you're printing the picture at home, it won't print. It will print as you see it. Basically, it's what you see is what you get. So if I turn the little eye on and not have the little red line through it, then that is the effect I would get if I were to print the picture. And the same is now if I were to print that picture, and the same if I were to print that picture. So if I don't want to print them, I can switch them off, or if I'm just wanting to see if I like the effect or not, I can turn them on and off. The very bottom picture is the actual photo. It's called background, and that picture you can also turn on and off if you have layers. If you turn it off and you see this checkerboard, a checkerboard always means in Photoshop that it's transparent, there isn't a picture there. Okay, so basically behind your thumbnail is nothing. So just be aware what eyes you're turning on and off. If they have no layers, you can't turn off your background picture because that's all you've got. To see other effects, you've got normal in the top here. Normal is a blending, ways that each of these effects you've done will impact your final picture, and you can blend them into one another, and each one of these may have a slightly different approach or different way of working with pictures below. You can click on the blending options and if you don't like any of them, you just click normal and you're back to your normal photo. Okay, not all of them will have an effect. Some of them will do nothing and others won't do very much. So just being aware that you can blend all of these sort of effects together, and in doing so they will have a change in the look of your photo. You also have opacity, so if I were to turn off some of the stuff here and have hue and saturation on, and I click on it with the left mouse key so it's highlighted, as long as the layer is active, then everything up here will become active as well. If I switch it off, then some things are switched off, so opacity doesn't work. Switch it back on again with my little magic eye, it becomes active layer, opacity now works. I can change the opacity, and that too will have an effect on the picture below. So it's changing how much this hue and saturation layer is impacting the picture below it, and that can be just done through opacity, as well as obviously done through things like the blending modes. The blending options again will have a different effect. Okay, so it's a matter of trying these out and just seeing how these work before you start maybe delving into the deeper parts of the software package, which, as I've said, I've done tutorials on each of these and what they mean and what they can do. If you don't like something, you can just highlight it with the left mouse key and drag it into the dustbin, holding down your left mouse key and letting go, and drag them up into the bin so you can clear them all out if you don't want them. And to save them. Now this is where it becomes a bit more complicated. If we want to continue working on layers later on in the day or tomorrow or next year, we need to be able to save them so that they don't disappear. And to do that, we'd go to File, Save As, and when we do this option, we have to obviously know where they're going to go, and we also need to file them in some kind of file type. Okay, we're probably going to give them a name. Photoshop PSD is Photoshop's own standard way of saving pictures with layers intact. So when if I were to open this picture again tomorrow as a PSD file, it will open it, and these layers will reopen exactly as they are now, and I can continue working as I am now on those layers. Okay. The drawback of PSD is that it effectively only works with Photoshop fully. There are some programs that it will also work with and can be converted to, but generally speaking the drawback is it's Photoshop's own document system, and if you were to keep this picture and take it to somebody else's computer, they may not be able to open it if they don't have a compatible piece of software, so they wouldn't be able to see the picture. A TIFF file is another way of doing it. TIFF files are slightly bigger than a PSD file, but not much, and these too can also store your layers intact. Okay, so if you're going to save your layers so that you can work on them again another day, then the general rule of thumb nowadays is to save them as a TIFF file. When you say save, you'll be given ways of saving it, and image compression will be none as standard because TIFF doesn't compress data, and everything else can be just left. You have to decide whether you'll have purchased a version of Photoshop for your computer, so either it's going to be a Macintosh or PC, and it will know because you would have purchased that particular version anyway, and all it then do is say OK. It might ask you, are you going to save with layers, and you would say OK, because the whole point of this is to keep the layers, so you're going to say OK, and when you do that, all of these layers will also be kept. Okay, the more layers you have, the bigger the file size will be, but it may not be a big issue depending on what you're doing. Okay, but that's the way you would save your pictures. If you're going to save these pictures, if you need this picture to be printed commercially, you're going to send it to a commercial printer, you're going to take it into a shop to be printed, or you're going to send it off to a magazine for competition, they won't be able to open it with layers. So we will then have to compress the layers into one picture. To do that, we go to Layer, and flatten the image. And if I had to flatten the image, you'll notice that the layers vanish. If I save this version, which is what you would do for commercial printing, and I go to File and Save As, I would then be saving it as a JPEG. Okay, if it doesn't come up as JPEG, you can find JPEG in the drop down menu and it comes up as a JPEG image. You save that as a JPEG, but you will find that you won't have any layers. So you will always need to have kept a version of this picture with layers if you ever want to work on the picture ever again with its layers, or you have to start from scratch from the original image. Okay, so the advice generally is to save a full version with layers. That should give you an overview of Photoshop layers and where to find stuff generally. The actual other videos I've got are specific to do with areas, specific points within the layers options. So I've got a video on each of these. I've done a video on each of these little options at the top. So have a look at those if you're interested in taking layers any further. It is extremely powerful, and in Photoshop and a lot of other programs now, layers is a standard way of working. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some introduction to the layers options there. Thank you for watching.